Before we start the show, I want to let you know something that I found out just last night. Next year will be our last season.
None of this should have happened. The most watched late-night program in America, 9 straight years at the top of the ratings, 2.7 million people tuning in every night. A show that just took home its first Emmy was killed. Not because the audience disappeared, not because the host was ready to move on. CBS pulled the plug while the show was still winning. And then, almost the moment Colbert said something on air that made the wrong people uneasy, the decision locked in within 72 hours. So what actually happened here? And why is one of the most celebrated voices in American late-night television clearing out his desk at the Ed Sullivan Theatre for the very last time? The call he never saw coming. Stephen Colbert was on vacation. He was completely in the dark. His manager had been sitting on the information for weeks and made the deliberate choice not to tell him while he was off the grid. So while Colbert was decompressing somewhere away from the cameras, the executives at CBS were in rooms deciding that his show, a franchise that had defined late night for more than 3 decades, was being retired. He didn't learn the truth until the evening of July 16, 2025. By the next morning, he was standing in front of his studio audience at the Ed Sullivan Theatre telling them himself. He got there before CBS did. The network had planned to control the announcement. He made that impossible. What he said that morning was remarkable for its composure. He thanked every one of the 200 people who had built the show day after day. He spoke warmly about what the place had meant to him across 10 years. And then he said something that quietly devastated the room. That there was no successor, no handoff, no heir to the seat. The Late Show brand, which had lived at CBS since 1993 and carried the weight of David Letterman's legendary 22-year run before Colbert's 11, was simply being retired. Not passed forward, not reimagined, erased. The audience booed. Colbert looked out at them and said he felt exactly the same way. That exchange told you more about the man and the show than any ratings chart ever could. The comment that may have sealed it. Here's where the story gets complicated, and where people are still arguing about what really happened. 3 days before CBS made the cancellation official, Colbert went on air and said something direct. Paramount, the parent company of CBS, had agreed to pay $16 million to resolve a lawsuit filed by Donald Trump. Trump had claimed CBS News selectively edited an interview with Kamala Harris during the 2024 presidential campaign on 60 Minutes. Colbert went on television and called that payment, by name and without softening it, something that looked a great deal like a bribe. 3 days later, The Late Show was cancelled. CBS pushed back with consistent official language. The decision was strictly financial, made against a difficult late-night environment, and had nothing to do with the show's content or anything at Paramount. But the sequence of events made that nearly impossible to accept. Senator Elizabeth Warren released a formal statement demanding to know whether the cancellation was politically motivated. The Writers Guild of America called for the New York State Attorney General to investigate, suggesting the decision bore hallmarks of institutional favor-seeking. Relevant given that the Trump administration was simultaneously reviewing Paramount's massive proposed merger with Skydance Media. That deal required FCC sign-off, whose chairman had already issued public warnings to late-night programs about equal time rules. The FCC approval came through in the weeks following the cancellation. Draw your own conclusions. Trump posted on Truth Social that he was delighted Colbert had been let go, took a shot at his abilities, and added, unprompted, that he expected Jimmy Kimmel would be next. Colbert responded by announcing the gloves were officially off, then delivered what may have been the most unfiltered monologue of his entire run. Which, given Colbert's history, is not a small thing to say. What it actually cost to keep the doors open. There is a financial reality here that deserves honest treatment, even if the timing tells a different story. The Late Show was losing money, somewhere around $40 million a year, though one journalist reported that figure was inflated by $10 million, putting the actual loss closer to $30 million annually. Either way, a significant problem for any broadcast network. Late-night television as a business had been deteriorating for years. The audience had fragmented. Streaming changed how people watched. Ad money was migrating away from the 11:35 slot toward digital platforms CBS didn't own. Even Colbert's monologue clips racking up millions of views on YouTube weren't putting money into CBS's accounts. The revenue belonged to the platforms. This was the same structural problem that had ended The Late Late Show with James Corden 2 years earlier. CBS replaced that one with something cheaper. The difference was that Colbert's show occupied the flagship slot, the most expensive, most prestigious real estate in the lineup, with no obvious low-cost alternative that carried the same cultural weight. Colbert himself had been an executive producer on the 12:35 program that replaced Corden, After Midnight, so he had a closer view than most of how tight late-night margins had become. He wasn't naive about the economics, but the speed of the decision and the fact that he was never given any opportunity to propose cost reductions led people inside the building to believe the financial rationale was not the full explanation. The replacement CBS announced for 11:35, a comedy game show from Byron Allen called Comics Unleashed, explicitly designed to avoid political commentary. The man behind the desk. There's something about Colbert's background that rarely makes the headlines, but explains almost everything about how he operates on camera. He was 10 years old when his father and 2 brothers died in a plane crash. Eastern Airlines Flight 212 went down in Charlotte, North Carolina in September of 1974. Colbert was the youngest of 11 children, and in a single afternoon the shape of his family changed forever. He has spoken about it over the years, but never in a way that reaches for pity. He has described how his mother taught him to move through catastrophic loss without curdling into bitterness. He has also talked about a crisis of faith in his early 20s, reaching a point where he considered himself an atheist, and then finding his way back to his Catholic beliefs through a strange, almost random encounter with a stranger on the street. This is not the biography of someone who drifted into comedy because it seemed comfortable. This is someone who found in humor a way to hold devastating things at just enough distance to look them in the eye. He attended Hampton-Sydney College before transferring to Northwestern University, earning his theater degree in 1986. He moved to Chicago, joined Second City, and formed an enduring creative partnership with Amy Sedaris and Paul Dinello. The 3 of them built Exit 57 for Comedy Central, which ran in the mid-90s and earned 5 Cable Ace nominations. He tried to land a writing job at The Late Show with David Letterman early in his career. Didn't make it. He found his way to The Daily Show in 1997, starting on a trial basis, brought in by producer Madeline Smithberg, who took a chance on an unknown. He became the longest-serving correspondent the show has ever had. The man now clearing out his desk at the Ed Sullivan Theatre is not someone who stumbled into this position. He built it from nothing, over decades, after losing the most foundational things in his life before he was old enough to understand what loss meant. The show that rewrote the late-night rulebook. When Colbert took over from David Letterman in September of 2015, the skepticism was real. Letterman had owned the 11:35 slot for 22 years, and Colbert, who had built his entire public identity around a fictional character, a satirical right-wing pundit on the Colbert Report, now had to show up as himself on a traditional talk show with no fictional scaffolding. The first season was rough. Ratings were soft, the tone felt uncertain, and a disastrous post-Super Bowl special in February 2016 gave critics exactly the stumble they needed. Then, something changed. Trump won the presidency in November 2016, and The Late Show found its voice almost immediately. The monologues became sharper, more urgent, more personal. The show stopped being broadly political and became specifically, relentlessly focused on holding the administration accountable, night after night, without hedging. By the 2016 to 2017 season, it was the highest-rated late-night program in the country for the first time since Letterman, averaging more than 3.2 million viewers per night. By 2018 to 2019, it had beaten The Tonight Show in the key 18 to 49 demographic. The first time any CBS late-night program had done that since 1994. It held that position for 9 consecutive years. Through the pandemic, through the writers' strike, through FCC warnings and merger reviews, all the way to the final season, which is the season it won its first Emmy for Outstanding Variety Talk Series, the last year of the show's existence. What made the run remarkable wasn't just the numbers. Colbert wasn't interested in the celebrity circuit in the traditional way. He had Joe Biden on during the pandemic and talked about grief with real seriousness. A conversation with Dua Lipa became a genuine exchange about his Catholic faith. He got Michelle Obama to do an impression of Barack on live television. These were conversations that made guests say things they hadn't planned on saying, extraordinarily rare in a format where everyone knows exactly what they're doing. It takes years of earned trust. Colbert earned it. The room where rivals showed up as friends. In the weeks before the finale, something happened that doesn't usually happen in late-night television. Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, Seth Meyers, and John Oliver all appeared in the same episode during the penultimate week. Colbert introduced them as his best television friends and joked that with all 5 of them in one room, Jon Stewart was now the designated survivor. The episode had the loose, unhurried warmth of people who'd been through something difficult together, which they had. The 5 of them had launched a podcast during the Writers Guild of America strike in 2023 called Strike Force 5. Every dollar went directly to the writers, producers, and crew, suddenly without income. 12 episodes, no scripts, just conversation. And audiences loved it. Kimmel announced he would air a repeat on the night of Colbert's finale instead of a new episode. He wasn't going to compete. He was just going to step aside. And then there was Letterman. David Letterman walked back into the Ed Sullivan Theatre, the building he had personally rebuilt, where he had made television history across 2 decades, and received a standing ovation from the moment he appeared. He told the audience he had every right to be angry and made no effort to hide it. He reminded the room they wouldn't be sitting there without him, and that whatever CBS had taken, no one could take a man's voice. Then he offered a send-off to the network, paraphrasing the legendary Ed Murrow, that brought the crowd to its feet and left nothing unsaid. Barack Obama also came by in the weeks before the finale. During their conversation, he suggested, not entirely as a joke, that Colbert might consider running for office, noting that the threshold for what qualified someone for the job had shifted in ways that were hard to ignore. The final nights, and the life waiting after. The last 4 episodes were announced on May 15th, 2026. Monday, May 18th, the worst of The Late Show, with Stephen Colbert, described pointedly as not a clip show. Tuesday, May 19th, Jon Stewart and Steven Spielberg, with a live performance by David Byrne alongside Colbert. Stewart had been Colbert's mentor, the person who gave him his first real platform at The Daily Show, and had publicly criticized CBS and Paramount after the cancellation, arguing the real explanation wasn't in any financial spreadsheet, but in a growing institutional fear of saying the wrong thing to the wrong people. Wednesday, May 20th. Colbert would take his own Colbert questionnaire, the format he'd subjected hundreds of guests to, and answer every question himself, with unannounced guests in the room. Bruce Springsteen would perform. Thursday, May 21st, the finale. CBS wasn't releasing details. What was already confirmed was a guest list that read like a Hall of Fame: Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, Seth Meyers, John Oliver, David Letterman, Tom Hanks, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Pedro Pascal, and The Strokes, an all-star send-off for a show that, by any honest reckoning, should still be on the air. As for what comes next, Colbert had that figured out long before any of this went public. Back in March, he announced through Warner Brothers that he would be writing a new Lord of the Rings film alongside his son Peter. The 2 of them had actually pitched it directly to Peter Jackson 2 full years before the cancellation. Jackson responded warmly. And Colbert, a genuine, encyclopedic Tolkien devotee who once recited the complete biography of Aragorn from memory on live television, prompting Viggo Mortensen to later send him an entire platter of Lord of the Rings characters sculpted in chocolate, had been sitting on this dream, knowing the show made it impossible to pursue. He told people in March, with the dry understatement that masks real emotion in him, that he'd always known he couldn't do both. But his summer schedule had just opened up in ways he hadn't entirely planned for. 11 Emmy Awards, 2 Grammys, 3 Peabody Awards, 1,801 episodes across 11 years, the longest continuous ratings-winning streak in late show franchise history, a show that won its first Emmy for Outstanding Variety Talk Series in 2025, the final year it existed. Behind all of it, a man who lost his father and 2 brothers at age 10, worked through a crisis of faith in his 20s, wrestled with panic attacks in his 30s while quietly wondering if he'd gambled everything on something that wasn't going to work, and then anchored the most watched late-night program in America for the better part of a decade. He said it himself. This ending wasn't entirely on his schedule, but not having to choose it gave him something unexpected, more material, more still to say, and one final undeniable reason to show up every night and mean every word of it. The studio audience booed when they found out. Colbert looked out at them and said he felt exactly the same way. 9 years at number 1, 11 Emmys, 1,801 nights, and one question that won't stop being asked. Do you think CBS ended this show because the numbers stopped working, or because some things had simply become too costly to say out loud? If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. For more stories like this, click on the next video that pops up on your screen. You never know what you'll discover next.